In this clip, we're going to walk through a full example of creating an Excel data model connected to various data sources, as well as summarizing that data within pivot tables. Let's get started. Within this demo database, I have 4 different tables, so customers, employees, products, and sales. What we're looking at here is some SQL queries where we can actually pull the data in preview. So let's run these 4 different queries and we'll review the results. So as you can see, the first table is our products. We have our employees. This is just descriptive data for the employee ID. We have our sales data table. This is our transactional table. And then we also have our customer data, which is just descriptive information for the customer ID. Let's take a quick look at the actual data diagram for this database. This database diagram gives us a quick overview on how the tables are related. So as you can see here, we have our fact table, which is our sales. So this is going to be one unique record for every single sales transaction. So we have our sales ID, and this is where we have our different mappings to our related tables. As you can see, we have a customer ID, which then correlates to this customers table where we have our descriptive name for the customer. Same concept for the products. So within the sales table, we have our product ID, and then we push off the descriptive data into this dimension table. And then lastly, the same thing as well for this employees. So the concept behind this is instead of having to duplicate these names within this fact table, which is going to be very long, there's going to be continuous records added to this fact table. So we don't want to have to store the same name on all these different rows. So what we do is we use an ID, which is typically an indexed value, so we can do quick lookups and correlations to that. Now that we can see what the database diagram looks like, we're now going to go into Excel and we're going to connect to this via SQL, as well as I have the customer stored in a text file. So I want to show you an example of connecting to different data sources within Excel. So if I hop over to Excel now, what I'll do to connect to this data is I'll go up to my data tab, select get data from database, and then from SQL Server database. Once I do this, I'll get this pop-up box where I have to reference my server and my database. I'm going to hop back into SQL Management Studio and get the server name. So to do this, I can just select change connection, and that will pop up this box where I can just copy this server name, hop back over to Excel, plug that in, grab the database name, sales demo, and then lastly we're going to grab the query. So I'll hop back in and grab the products, and we'll hit OK. From here, powerquery will now load and will give us our preview. So I'm going to select transform data to go into the editor. As you can see, we have our products table, product, name, and price. So I'm going to rename this as products. I'm now going to duplicate this and then just change the query so we don't have to go through that whole connection process again. So right click and duplicate. I'll now go back and grab my second query for employees. I'll rename this. I'll now go to the view tab and pull up my query settings, where I can then go and change my query by going into the source. So you just select the gearbox here. That will then open back up this where we originally started. So we'll just paste in our other query. So as you can see, now we have our employee information. So employee first name, middle initial, and last name. We're going to do this one more time and pull in the sales data. So right click, duplicate, query settings, source, come into the source. I'm going to hop back to Management Studio, grab this third query, paste it in here. If you have a large database, what you might want to do here is actually, instead of just selecting all, you would want to potentially group your data. So you could pull out the actual individual transaction level data and just group it based off like the product, the customer, and the salesperson. That way you can just group your rows. You could apply a count, as well as you could aggregate it by, let's say for example, month and day, or month and year, or whatever kind of granularity you need. You could group the data down to minimize total data that needs to be loaded into Excel. So we now have our sales data. I also have one text file. So for example here, customer. I ran it through Management Studio and then just pasted it into a notepad just to show you a different example of connecting to a different data source. So what I'll do is I'll come up to new source, select file, and then text. From here, what you'll do is navigate to your directory where you have that file, select it. We'll now load us a preview. From here, let's say for example you have a CSV file. This would be kind of the same concept. Instead of a tab here, you'd have like a comma. Okay, so we have all of our data tables in here, all of our queries. So now what we'll do is file and close and load. As you can see, our data is now loaded into tables within Excel. So we have 4 different tables. One additional step we'll want to do is actually add these to our data model. So to do this, we can simply just go through these connections and right click, load to, and select add this to the data model. What you'll then want to do is navigate to the data tab. From here you'll go to data tools, and currently out of view right now, but to the far right there's an option to select manage data model. So we'll select that. Once we're within the data model, we will go to our design tab and select manage relationships. From here we're going to create our different relationships, so the same thing as the data diagram we originally reviewed. So to do this, we're just going to have to go through those different connections. So I have my sales, my customer ID, we're going to map that to our customer. We also have our product and our sales. And lastly, we have our employee. As you can see, the sales table, which is our fact table, is our many-to-one relationship. So there's going to be multiple duplicating keys, and then within the actual dimension tables, there's going to just be one row for each of those keys. So we'll close out of this now. From here, we'll hop in a new sheet. We'll go into Insert, and now we can create pivot tables using that data model. So we'll select from our data model. Now that we have our data model in place, we can now easily create pivot tables as well as pivot charts. We can now summarize this data. So let's say, for example, we go into our sales table here. We can pull in our customer ID, pull over our quantity. We can go into our products, say pull in the product ID, the product name, pull in our customer name, customer last name, our salesperson ID as a column. So as you can see here, you can summarize the data however you'd like. So as you can see, you can change around these pivot tables very easily. We'll pull out our customer ID, and we'll pull in our employee ID. Say first name. So now we can see which person, the product that they're selling, as well as the total quantity. So I hope this gives you a better understanding of how data models work. This is a very simplified version of it, but I hope it kind of instills what you can actually do as well as the different capabilities.